They told me not to come. Not with anger. Not with tears. Just that practiced casual tone my mother uses when she's already decided something. Marcus, maybe it's better if you sit this one out. Your sister's day, you know. Less complicated. I didn't argue. I'd stopped arguing years ago. What I did instead was check my bank account, scroll through 2 years of transfer receipts, and quietly cancel every outstanding payment tied to that wedding. The venue deposit, the catering balance, the photographer's final invoice, the floral arrangements, even the transportation shuttle they booked for out-of-town guests. Gone. All of it. Because if I wasn't family enough to stand in the garden, I wasn't bank enough to pay for the roses. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Marcus Chun. I'm 32 years old. I built a software development company from a laptop in my studio apartment and turned it into something that employs 43 people across 3 states. I'm good at solving problems, scaling systems, keeping things running when everyone else has clocked out. For the last 8 years, I've also been something else to my family. The safety net. The fallback plan. The one who pays when no one else can. And apparently, the one who doesn't get a seat at his own sister's wedding. Didn't start that way. None of it ever does. It started with Kevin, my younger brother, needing books for his sophomore year. Just textbooks, Marcus. I'll pay you back. I handed over $400. He never mentioned it again. Then it was Dad's truck. Transmission blew on the highway. Mom called me at work, voice tight with worry. We don't have that kind of cash right now. Could you? I could. So I did. $2,200 to a mechanic in Gresham who didn't ask questions. Then it was Rachel, my older sister, the golden child. She'd gotten into a graduate program but needed help with her deposit. It's an investment in my future, Marcus. You get that, right? I got it. I wired $3,000 that same afternoon. What I didn't get, not then, was that I just opened a door I'd never be able to close. 'Cause after that, it wasn't asking anymore. It was assuming. The calls came in with that same soft expectation. We need help with the roof. Marcus will handle it. Kevin's car got towed. Marcus can get it out. Rachel's moving into a new place and the landlord wants first, last, and deposit. Marcus has it covered. And I did. Every single time. I covered it, fixed it, wired it, handled it. I told myself it was temporary. That they'd get back on their feet. That this was what family did. But somewhere along the way I stopped being Marcus. I became a function. A resource. An ATM with a brother's name. They stopped asking how I was doing. Stopped visiting my office when I expanded into a real space with glass walls and a view of the river. Stopped congratulating me when I landed my first 6-figure contract. Not because they were cruel, but because my success had become their entitlement. I was doing fine, so they didn't need to worry. And if I was doing fine, then I could keep giving. The worst part wasn't the money. I made good money. The worst part was realizing I'd become invisible in every way that mattered. They didn't see my work. Didn't see the late nights or the risk I took walking away from a stable job to build something of my own. They saw a checking account. A solution. A convenience. When I tried to talk about a project I was proud of, Dad would nod absently and then ask if I'd seen the email about Kevin's dental bill. When I mentioned feeling burned out, Mom would sigh and say, "Well, that's the price of success, honey." Then she'd pivot to Rachel's engagement party and how they still needed a little help with the venue. Rachel got engaged 14 months ago. Derek proposed on a beach in Costa Rica. She called me from the airport on her way back, voice bubbling with excitement. "I'm getting married, Marcus. Can you believe it?" I told her I was happy for her. I was. Rachel had always been the favorite. The one who got the attention, the forgiveness, the benefit of the doubt. She was charming in a way I never learned to be. Warm where I was quiet. Social where I was solitary. Growing up, I accepted it. She was older. She was easier to love. I didn't resent her for it. I just learned to be useful instead. The wedding planning started small. Mom mentioned they'd found a beautiful estate along the river. Riverside Gardens, she said. It's perfect, but it's a little out of budget. I knew what was coming. I always knew. I asked how much. She named a number. I transferred it the next day. Then came the photographer. The dress. The cake. The jazz ensemble because Rachel had always loved live music. The signature cocktails. The welcome bags for the guests. The rehearsal dinner at some bistro downtown that charged $60 a plate. Every time the request came wrapped in excitement. Isn't this amazing, Marcus? Can you believe how beautiful this will be? And every time I said yes. I kept a spreadsheet. Not because I wanted to throw it in anyone's face, but because I'd learned the hard way that memory is selective. Families rewrite history to fit the story they want to believe. I'd watched it happen with the truck, with Kevin's textbooks, with Rachel's grad school deposit. Conversations I remembered clearly would get blurred or dismissed. I never said that. You're misremembering. Are you sure? So I kept records. Dates, amounts, screenshots of text messages. I backed it all up in 3 places. I didn't know what I'd ever need it for. I just knew I needed it. By the time the wedding was 2 months out, I'd contributed over $70,000. Not loaned. Contributed. There were no payment plans, no IOUs, no promises to pay me back. It was just understood. Marcus has it. Marcus will take care of it. And I did. I took care of the florals when Rachel decided she wanted peonies instead of roses. I took care of the upgraded bar package when Derek's family requested top-shelf whiskey. I took care of the custom wedding website I designed and built myself because I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd appreciate the personal touch. I added a photo gallery, a timeline of Rachel and Derek's relationship, a section for RSVPs. I spent 2 weekends on it. Rachel sent a thumbs-up emoji in response. 3 weeks before the wedding, I got a call from Mom. It was a Tuesday. I was in a meeting with a new client, but I stepped out because she called twice. I figured it was urgent. I answered in the hallway, still holding my notepad. Hey Mom. What's up? There was a pause. That kind of pause that means she's choosing her words carefully. So she started. We've been talking. Your father and I. And Rachel. Her tone shifted, got softer. More delicate. We think maybe it would be easier if you didn't come to the wedding. I didn't respond right away. I thought I'd misheard. Easier for who? For everyone, she said. You know how you are, Marcus. You're not really a people person. And Rachel's worried you'll feel out of place. There's going to be a lot of Derek's family, a lot of socializing. We just thought it might be better. Less stressful for you. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just a clarity I hadn't felt in years. You're uninviting me. She laughed. A light, dismissive sound. Don't be dramatic. We're not uninviting you. We're just saying you don't have to feel obligated. You've done so much already. This way you can relax. Enjoy your weekend. I stood there in that hallway, staring at the gray carpet under the fluorescent lights, and I realized she actually believed what she was saying. She thought she was doing me a favor. That I'd be relieved. That I'd thank her for the out. I asked her a question. I kept my voice level. Did Rachel ask for this? Another pause. We all agreed, Marcus. It's what's best. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Okay. That was all I said. I hung up. I walked back into the meeting. I closed the deal. And then I went back to my office, opened my laptop, and began systematically pulling every dollar I'd ever committed to that wedding. The first thing I did was call the venue. I identified myself, provided my confirmation number, and informed them I needed to cancel the outstanding balance on my card. The coordinator, a woman named Angela, sounded confused. Cancel? Mr. Chan, the wedding is in 3 weeks. We've already... Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We allocated resources. I understand, I said calmly. But I'm the one who made the payment, and I'm withdrawing my authorization. She put me on hold. Came back 5 minutes later with a manager. They tried to negotiate. Tried to explain the cancellation policy. I let them finish. Then I said, check your contract. The deposit is non-refundable. I'm not asking for the deposit back. I'm stopping the final payment. There's a difference. They put me on hold again. I waited. I had time. When they came back, their tone had changed. We'll need to reach out to the other party. To Miss Chun. You do that, I said. And I hung up. Next was the photographer. A guy named Sam who did high-end wedding shoots and charged accordingly. I'd paid half up front. The other half was due the week of the wedding. I sent him an email. Professional. Polite. Withdrawing my portion of the payment. He replied within the hour asking if there was a problem. I didn't answer. The caterer was next. Then the florist. Then the jazz ensemble. One by one, I contacted every vendor I personally contracted and paid. I didn't cancel the services. I just removed my financial backing. Let them figure it out. Took 4 hours. When I was done, I sat back in my chair and stared at my screen. My phone was still on silent. No messages. No missed calls. They didn't know yet. I poured myself a drink. Whiskey neat. I don't usually drink alone, but that night felt like an exception. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. Hollowed out. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long I'd forgotten it was there until I finally set it down. The next morning my phone exploded. 17 missed calls by the time I woke up. A dozen texts. 3 voicemails. All from Mom. The messages escalated from concern to confused to panicked. Marcus, call me. Marcus, what's going on? The venue called. They said you canceled. This has to be a mistake. Call me right now. I didn't call. I got dressed, made coffee, went to the office. My assistant Jamie asked if I was okay. I looked that off. I told her I was fine. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push. Around noon, Rachel called. I let it ring. She called again. And again. On the 4th attempt, I answered. What the hell, Marcus? Her voice was sharp. High-pitched. The venue is threatening to cancel. The photographer says we owe him $4,000. Mom is losing her mind. What did you do? I didn't do anything, I said. I withdrew my payments. There was a beat of silence. You what? I repeated myself. Slowly. I withdrew my payments. You told me I didn't need to come to the wedding. I figured that meant you didn't need my money either. She exploded. Are you kidding me right now? You're going to sabotage my wedding because your feelings are hurt? This is insane, Marcus. This is childish. I stayed quiet. Let her vent. When she finally paused for breath, I said, You uninvited me, Rachel. You and Mom and Dad sat down and decided I wasn't worth a seat. So I decided your wedding wasn't worth my bank account. It's simple math. She sputtered. Tried to backtrack. We didn't uninvite you. We just thought I know what you thought. I interrupted. You thought I'd keep paying and stay quiet. You were wrong. She hung up. 10 minutes later, Dad called. His voice was low. Controlled. Dangerous. You need to fix this. Now. I leaned back in my chair. No, I don't. Boy, don't test me. You're going to make this right, or so help me, I will never forgive this. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. Dad, you stopped seeing me as your son years ago. I'm just returning the favor. And I hung up on him. Felt better than it should have. The calls kept coming. Kevin tried next. Then one of Rachel's bridesmaids. Then Derek's mother, who I'd never even spoken to before. Everyone had the same message. Fix this. Make it right. Think about Rachel. Think about the family. No one said we're sorry. No one said we were wrong. They just wanted me to fold. To come back in line. To be the Marcus they needed instead of the one I'd become. That evening I got an email from a lawyer. Not mine. Theirs. It was a formal letter outlining potential legal action for breach of verbal contract and financial damages. I forwarded it to Jonathan Park, my attorney, with a single line. Handle this. He called me 20 minutes later laughing. Marcus, they don't have a case. Verbal contracts for gifts aren't enforceable. And you have documentation proving you made voluntary contributions. This is a scare tactic. Let me respond. I told him to go ahead. Jonathan sent back a letter the next day. It was polite, professional, and devastating. It outlined every payment I'd made, every text message where I'd been voluntarily offered to help, and every instance where repayment was never discussed. It concluded with a single line. Mr. Chun has no legal or moral obligation to continue funding an event from which he has been explicitly excluded. If further harassment continues, we will pursue our own legal remedies. That shut them up. For 2 days. Then Mom showed up at my office. I was in the middle of a video call with a client in Seattle when Jamie knocked on my glass door. She looked uncomfortable, which was unusual. Jamie had been with me for 3 years and wasn't easily rattled. I muted my mic and looked up. Your mother is here, she said quietly. She's in the lobby. She says she's not leaving until you talk to her. I glanced at my screen, at the client waiting patiently on the other end. Tell her I'm in a meeting. Jamie nodded and disappeared. 5 minutes later she was back. She's still here. She's crying. Closed my eyes for a second, then unmuted my mic. I apologized to the client, told him something urgent had come up and rescheduled. He was understanding. I wasn't. Mom was sitting on the gray couch near the reception desk when I came out. Her eyes were red, tissue balled up in her hand. She stood when she saw me, and for a moment she looked small. Fragile. I'd never thought of my mother as fragile before. She'd always been the steady one, the planner, the one who held everything together. But standing there in my lobby, she looked like someone who'd lost something and didn't know how to get it back. Marcus, she said. Her voice cracked. Please, can we talk? I didn't want to make a scene. Not in front of my team. So I nodded toward the small conference room off to the side. She followed me in. I closed the door but didn't sit. She did, perched on the edge of a chair like she might need to run. I stayed standing, arms crossed. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out what to say. How to say it. Finally she spoke. This isn't like you. I raised an eyebrow. What isn't like me? This, she gestured vaguely. Punishing your sister. Holding money over our heads. We raised you better than this. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Something colder. You raised me to be useful, I said. You raised me to say yes. To fix things. To stay quiet and write the checks. And I did. For 8 years I did exactly what you raised me to do. She shook her head. That's not fair. We never asked you to. Yes you did, I interrupted. You asked me every single time. And when I gave, you didn't say thank you. You just asked for more. She opened her mouth to argue, but I kept going. When was the last time you asked me how I was doing, Mom? Not how my business was doing. Not if I could help with something. Just how I was. As a person. She stared at me. I could see her mind working, trying to remember. She couldn't. Because it hadn't happened. Not in years. I continued, my voice steady. You know what hurts the most? It's not the money. It's not even being uninvited to the wedding. It's that you all sat around a table, talked about me, and decided I wasn't worth including. And then you called me and pretended you were doing me a favor. Like I was some burden you were graciously releasing. She wiped her eyes. We thought you'd be uncomfortable. You're always so quiet at family events. You never seem to enjoy yourself. I laughed. It came out harsher than I intended. I'm quiet because every family event turns into a financial planning session. Last Thanksgiving I couldn't finish my plate before Dad started talking about refinancing the house. At Rachel's engagement party, Kevin pulled me aside to ask for a loan before I'd even congratulated her. I don't enjoy myself because I'm not there as your son or Rachel's brother. I'm there as your accountant. She flinched. That's not true. Isn't it? I leaned against the table. Tell me one thing you know about my life right now. One thing that doesn't involve money. What project am I working on? What have I been stressed about? What did I do last weekend? Silence. She looked down at her hands. I waited. She didn't answer because she didn't know. And that, more than anything, told me everything. I'm not punishing Rachel, I said quietly. I'm protecting myself. You can't keep taking from someone and then act surprised when they have nothing left to give. She stood up and for a second I thought she might hug me. But she didn't. She just looked at me with something like disappointment and said, Your father is right. You've changed. And she left. I stood there in that empty conference room for a long time after she was gone. The sun was starting to set through the windows, casting long shadows across the table. I wasn't sure if she meant I'd changed for the worse, or just that I'd changed into someone she didn't recognize. Either way, she wasn't wrong. I had changed. I'd stopped pretending that love and obligation were the same thing. I walked back to my office, closed the door, and pulled up the folder on my desktop labeled family. It was everything. Every receipt, every text message, every email request. I'd been keeping it for 2 years. Ever since I realized my memory of events never matched theirs. I opened a new document and started writing. Not for them. For me. A timeline of everything I'd given, everything I'd sacrificed, and everything I'd lost in the process. Took me 3 hours. By the time I finished, it was dark outside. My office was empty. Everyone had gone home. I sat there reading through what I'd written, and I realized something. I'd been waiting for them to see me, to acknowledge me, to thank me, but they never would. Not because they were cruel, but because they'd never had to. I'd made it too easy. I'd removed every consequence, every boundary, every reason for them to treat me like anything other than a resource. And that was on me as much as it was on them. The wedding was 12 days away. I didn't hear from anyone for 3 of them. I assumed they were scrambling, trying to figure out how to cover the costs I'd pulled. Part of me wondered if they'd cancel. Part of me hoped they would. Not out of spite, but because maybe then they'd understand what I'd been carrying. But on the 4th day, I got a text from Kevin. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you." No preamble. No apology. Just a request. I almost ignored it. But curiosity got the better of me. I replied. "When and where?" "We met at a coffee shop near my apartment." Neutral ground. Kevin was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. He'd ordered for me. Black coffee, no sugar. He remembered. I sat down across from him and didn't touch the cup. He looked rough. Tired. His hair was longer than usual, and he had that look people get when they've been arguing a lot and losing. "Thanks for coming," he said. I didn't respond. He took a sip of his coffee, buying time. "Look, I know you're pissed. And you have every right to be. But Rachel's a mess. Mom's having panic attacks. Dad hasn't spoken to anyone in days. This is tearing the family apart." I leaned back in my chair. "And what do you want me to do about that?" He blinked like the answer was obvious. "Fix it. Put the money back. Come to the wedding. Let's just move past this." I stared at him. "Move past it?" He nodded. "Yeah. I mean, what's done is done, right? We can't change it. But we can move forward." I felt that coldness again. The same one I'd felt in the hallway when Mom called. "Kevin, do you know how much I've given this family in the last 8 years? He shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know." "A lot?" $87,000, I said. "Not counting the small stuff. Not counting the dinners I paid for or the gas money or the random emergencies. 87,000. He stared at me. His mouth opened, then closed. "I don't think it's that much." I pulled out my phone, opened the spreadsheet and turned it toward him. "Scroll." He did. Slowly. I watched his face change as he went through it. The truck. The textbooks. Rachel's deposit. The roof. His car. The wedding. Line after line after line. When he finally looked up, he looked sick. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said. "None of you did. 'Cause I never made you. I just kept saying yes. And you all kept asking." He pushed the phone back toward me. "So what do you want?" "An apology." "I want you to stop pretending I'm the problem," I said. "I want you to admit that you all took me for granted. That you saw me as a wallet, not a brother. And I want you to understand that I'm done. I'm not paying for the wedding. I'm not covering anyone's bills. I'm not the safety net anymore." He looked down at his coffee. "What if I said I was sorry? Would that change anything?" I thought about it. Honestly, would it? If Kevin sat there and apologized, really apologized, would I go back? Would I undo what I'd done? I shook my head. "No, because you're not sorry. You're scared. There's a difference." He didn't argue. He just sat there looking defeated. After a long silence, he said, "Rachel's going to have the wedding. Derek's parents are covering most of it now. She's furious, but it's happening." I nodded. "Good. She should have it. It's her day." He looked at me like he was trying to figure out if I meant it. I did. I wasn't trying to ruin Rachel's wedding. I just wasn't going to fund it. There's a difference. He stood up, left his coffee on the table, and walked out without another word. I sat there for a while longer, staring at the cup he'd bought me. It had gone cold. That night I got an email. No subject line. Just an attachment. I almost deleted it without opening, assuming it was something from their lawyer again. But the sender was Rachel. I hesitated, then clicked. It was a photo. The 2 of us as kids, maybe 8 and 10 years old. We were at the coast, standing in front of a tide pool. I was holding a starfish and she was laughing at something off camera. I didn't remember the day. Didn't remember what we'd been laughing about or who took the picture. But I remembered the feeling. The simplicity of it. Before everything got complicated. Before money and expectations and resentment. There was no message attached. Just the photo. I stared at it for a long time, then closed my laptop. The wedding happened on a Saturday in late September. I didn't go. I spent the day hiking up in the gorge, phone turned off, alone with my thoughts. It was one of those perfect fall days where the air is crisp, and the leaves are just starting to turn. I stopped at a viewpoint overlooking the river and sat on a rock for a while. I thought about Rachel walking down the aisle in a dress I'd paid for. About my parents sitting in chairs I'd rented. About a band playing songs I'd funded. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness. Just distance. When I got back to my apartment that evening, I turned my phone back on. 23 messages. I didn't read them. I took a shower, made dinner, and watched a movie I'd been meaning to see for months. It was a quiet night. Peaceful even. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to need something. I wasn't bracing for the next request. I was just existing. And it felt like freedom. 3 days later, I got a call from Jonathan. He sounded amused. "You're not going to believe this." "What?" "Your parents are trying to claim the house." I sat up. "What house?" "The one you bought for them 4 years ago. Apparently, they've been telling people it's theirs. They're trying to transfer the deed to Rachel as a wedding gift." I felt my jaw tighten. "Can they do that?" "Not legally," Jonathan said. "It's in your name. But they filed paperwork anyway. I'm guessing they thought you wouldn't notice or wouldn't fight it." I closed my eyes and took a breath. "Fight it?" He paused. "You sure? This is going to get ugly." "It already is," I said. "And I'm done pretending it isn't." Jonathan filed an injunction the next day. The paperwork was clear. The house was mine. I'd purchased it outright when my parents were underwater on their mortgage and facing foreclosure. They'd been behind on payments for 2 years, too proud to tell anyone until the bank sent the final notice. I'd stepped in, paid off the balance, and put the house in my name with a legal agreement. They could live there as long as they wanted rent-free, but they couldn't sell it, mortgage it, or transfer it. It was protection. For them and for me. I never thought I'd have to enforce it. But when Jonathan sent over the documents my parents had filed, I realized they'd been planning this for months. Long before the wedding. Long before they uninvited me. They'd been setting up the transfer quietly, forging signatures, backdating forms. They hadn't just assumed I'd roll over. They'd actively tried to cut me out. When I saw the paperwork, I didn't feel betrayed. I felt vindicated. Because it confirmed what I'd been afraid to admit. They'd never seen me as family. They'd seen me as a means to an end. And when I stopped being useful, they tried to take what was left. The injunction was granted within 48 hours. My parents received a cease and desist letter from Jonathan with a very clear message. Any further attempts to fraudulently transfer property would result in criminal charges. I didn't call them. Didn't explain. Just let the lawyers do the talking. That's when the real fallout began. My phone rang nonstop for a week. Messages piled up. Voicemails ranged from angry to pleading to threatening. Dad called me a traitor. Mom said I was breaking her heart. Kevin said I'd gone too far. Rachel didn't call at all. She sent one text. "You've destroyed this family." I didn't reply. Because the truth was I hadn't destroyed anything. I just stopped holding it together. 2 weeks after the wedding, I was sitting in my office when Jamie buzzed me. "There's a woman here to see you. Says her name is Diane Sullivan." I frowned. I didn't know anyone by that name. "Send her in." A woman in her mid-50s walked in, well-dressed, carrying a leather bag. She smiled politely and extended her hand. "Mr. Chun, thank you for seeing me. I'm Derek's mother." I shook her hand, confused. "Mrs. Sullivan, what can I do for you?" She sat down, smoothed her skirt, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I wanted to meet the man who paid for my son's wedding." I felt my stomach drop. She continued, her tone measured. "Derek told me everything. About how your family treated you. About the money. About them uninviting you." She paused. "I want you to know that if I'd known, I would have stopped it. I would have insisted you be there." I didn't know what to say. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "This is a check. It's for $70,000. It's not everything you spent, but it's what we could reasonably cover. Derek and I talked and we agreed. You shouldn't have been put in that position. I stared at the envelope. I can't take this. Why not? Because it wasn't your responsibility. It wasn't yours either, she said gently. But you took it on anyway. Let me do the same. I looked at her, this stranger who understood more in 5 minutes than my own family had in 8 years. I took the envelope, not because I needed the money, but because refusing it felt like insulting the gesture. Thank you. She stood. I hope someday your family realizes what they lost. And I hope you find people who see you for who you are, not what you can give. She left, and I sat there staring at the envelope for a long time. That night, I deposited the check and donated the entire amount to a nonprofit that helped young entrepreneurs start their own businesses. Felt right. Like closing a circle. The months that followed were quieter than I expected. My parents stopped calling. Kevin sent occasional texts that I rarely answered. Rachel unfriended me on social media. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she and Derek had moved into a condo downtown, that Mom had taken a part-time job at a bookstore, that Dad was talking about selling the house. Except he couldn't, because it wasn't his to sell. I didn't gloat, didn't feel victorious. I just felt separate, like I'd been cut free from something I'd been tangled in for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to move without resistance. I started seeing a therapist, not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted to understand how I'd let it get that far. Dr. Patel was patient, insightful, and didn't let me off easy. She asked hard questions. Why did you keep giving? What were you hoping to earn? When did obligation become identity? I didn't have good answers at first, but over time I started to see the pattern. I'd been trying to prove I was worth keeping, that if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, they'd see me, love me, choose me. But the opposite happened. The more I gave, the less they valued it. Because people don't appreciate what costs them nothing. One session, Dr. Patel asked me if I regretted what I'd done. Walking away. Pulling the money. I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I said. I regret how long it took. She nodded. That's growth. I started rebuilding. Not my life, that was already solid, but my sense of self. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with. I took a weekend trip to the mountains just because I wanted to. I said no to things without feeling guilty. I said yes to things without calculating the cost. I remembered what it felt like to be a person, not a function. And slowly, the weight I'd been carrying started to lift. 6 months after the wedding, I ran into Kevin at a grocery store. It was awkward. He was in the produce section and I was grabbing coffee. We made eye contact across the aisle. He hesitated, then walked over. Hey. We stood there for a second, neither of us sure what to say. He looked different. Older maybe. Or just tired. How have you been? Fine, I said. You? He shrugged. Getting by. He shifted his weight, glanced at his cart. Look, I know things are weird. But I just wanted to say I get it now. Why you did what you did. I didn't ask him to elaborate. Didn't need to. Thanks. He nodded. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime. Talk. Maybe, I said. But I didn't mean it, and I think he knew. We said awkward goodbyes and went our separate ways. I didn't feel sad about it. Just neutral. Like running into someone you used to know. A year after the wedding, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. From Rachel. I almost threw it away without opening it. But curiosity won. I sat down at my kitchen table and read it. It was 3 pages long. She didn't apologize, not directly. But she acknowledged things. She said she'd been selfish. That she'd taken me for granted. That she'd let Mom and Dad's expectations shape how she saw me. She said Derek's mother had told her what she'd done, giving me that check, and that it had made her realize how little she'd ever given back. She didn't ask for forgiveness. Didn't ask me to come back. Just said she hoped I was doing okay. That she missed me. That she was sorry. I read it twice. Then I folded it up and put it in a drawer. I didn't write back. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't know what to say. Sorry doesn't rebuild what's been broken. It just acknowledges the damage. And sometimes that's not enough. I thought about that photo she'd sent. The 2 of us as kids by the tide pool. I wondered if she remembered that day. If she remembered who we used to be before everything got complicated. Maybe she did. Maybe that's why she sent it. Or maybe she was just trying to remind me of a version of us that didn't exist anymore. Either way, I didn't need to go back. I'd spent too long trying to be someone I wasn't so they'd love the person I was. And it never worked. So I stopped. I let go of the idea that family meant unconditional sacrifice. I let go of the belief that love required me to disappear. And I started building a life where I wasn't invisible, where my worth wasn't measured in deposits and transfers, where I could exist without apologizing for taking up space. It wasn't easy. Some days I still felt the pull. The old instinct to fix things, to smooth things over, to make myself small so everyone else could be comfortable. But I didn't give in. Because I'd learned the hard way that you can't save people who don't want to be saved. And you can't make people see you if they've decided you're not worth looking at. So I moved forward. I grew my business. I traveled. I made new friends who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. I laughed more. Stressed less. And slowly, I became the version of myself I'd been too busy to notice before. The version who didn't need permission to exist. Who didn't need validation to feel whole. Who didn't need a family that saw me as a checkbook to know I was worth more than that. And that, more than anything, felt like coming home. 18 months after the wedding that never included me, I was sitting in a boardroom in downtown Seattle closing the biggest deal of my career. The client was a healthcare logistics company looking to overhaul their entire software infrastructure, and they'd chosen my firm over 3 competitors, including one with 10 times our revenue. When the contracts were signed and the handshakes exchanged, I walked out of that building into the rain feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval. This was mine. Built by my hands, my vision, my refusal to quit when things got hard. No one in my family knew about this deal. No one had asked how work was going. And for the first time, that didn't bother me. I celebrated that night with my team. We rented out a small restaurant on the waterfront, and I watched my employees laugh and toast and talk about what this contract meant for the company. Jamie gave a speech thanking me for taking a chance on her when she was fresh out of school. My lead developer, Marcus, not the same name as mine but close enough that we joked about it, talked about how he'd left a corporate job to work for me because he believed in what we were building. These people saw me. Not my bank account. Not my usefulness. Just me. And sitting there surrounded by them, I realized I'd built a family of my own. One that didn't require me to bleed for belonging. When I got home that night, there was a package outside my door. No return address. Just my name written in handwriting I recognized immediately. My mother's. I picked it up, unlocked my door, and set it on the kitchen counter. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Part of me didn't want to. Part of me knew that whatever was inside would complicate the peace I'd found. But I opened it anyway. Inside was a photo album. Old, worn at the edges, the kind with the plastic sleeves that crinkle when you turn the pages. There was a note on top, folded in half. I opened it. Marcus, I found this in the attic. I thought you might want it. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. About the choices I made. About the things I said and didn't say. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to have this. Mom. I set the note aside and opened the album. The first page was a photo of me as a baby, maybe 6 months old, sitting in a high chair with food all over my face. My father was in the background laughing. I didn't remember ever seeing him laugh like that. Not at me. Not in years. I turned the page. More photos. Me learning to ride a bike. Me at my first science fair with the volcano project. Me graduating high school, standing between my parents, all of us smiling. I kept turning pages. Each one a memory I'd either forgotten or rewritten in my mind. There were photos of Rachel and me building sandcastles. Of Kevin and me playing video games on the living room floor. Of family dinners where everyone looked happy. I stared at these images of a life I barely recognized. Had we really been that close once? Or was I just remembering it wrong? Maybe both. Maybe families are like that. Complicated. Layered. Capable of deep love and deep harm all at once. I closed the album and put it back in the box. I didn't know what to do with it. Didn't know if keeping it meant holding on or if throwing it away meant letting go. So I just left it on the counter and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Derek. Rachel's husband. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a while. Derek and I had never spoken directly. Everything I knew about him came secondhand from family conversations before everything fell apart. He was an accountant. Quiet. Pragmatic. Rachel said he balanced her out, kept her grounded. I wondered what he wanted. I almost didn't respond. But curiosity, that same curiosity that made me open my mother's package, made me type back. About what? His response came quickly. About what happened. About what I didn't know was happening. I'd like to explain. No pressure. Just coffee if you're open to it. I thought about it. What did I have to lose? I'd already lost everything that mattered from that part of my life. A conversation couldn't make it worse. I agreed to meet him the following Tuesday at a cafe near my office. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He stood when he saw me, extended his hand. Marcus, thanks for coming. I shook his hand and sat down. He looked nervous, kept adjusting his watch, glancing at his coffee cup like it might give him answers. I didn't make it easy for him. I just waited. Finally, he spoke. I need you to know I didn't know about any of it. Rachel told me you were helping with the wedding, but she made it sound like you offered. Like you wanted to. I didn't know they uninvited you. I didn't know how much you'd actually paid. I didn't know until after, when my mom told me what she'd done, giving you that check. I looked at him. And what did Rachel say when you found out? He looked down. She said you were overreacting. That you'd always been sensitive about money. That the family was just trying to protect you from feeling obligated. I felt that familiar coldness settle in. Protect me. He must have seen something in my face because he quickly added I didn't believe her. I pushed. I asked questions. And the more I learned, the more I realized she'd been lying. Not just to me. To herself. She'd convinced herself that you were fine. That you didn't mind. That you were just being generous. But when I saw the spreadsheets, when I saw how much you'd actually given, I knew it was more than that. You were being used. I didn't respond. He continued. I tried to talk to her about it. Told her we needed to make it right. But she shut down. Said it was family business and I wouldn't understand. We fought about it for months. Still do sometimes. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you deserve to know that not everyone thought what they did was okay. And because I wanted to apologize. Even though it wasn't my family, I benefited from it. I stood at that altar in a suit you paid for, ate food you paid for, celebrated a day you made possible. And you weren't even there. That's not right. I studied him. He seemed genuine. But I'd learned the hard way that seeming genuine and being genuine were 2 different things. What do you want from me, Derek? Nothing, he said. I don't want anything. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. And to tell you that my mom was right. You shouldn't have been put in that position. And for what it's worth, Rachel knows it too. She just doesn't know how to say it. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked, how is she? He hesitated. Honestly? Not great. She's been struggling. The wedding was beautiful, but everything after has been hard. She feels guilty. About you. About how things ended. But she's too proud to reach out. I thought about the letter she'd sent. The one I never responded to. Maybe that was her reaching out. Maybe I just hadn't wanted to see it. Does she know you're here? I asked. He shook his head. No. She'd probably be mad if she knew. But I needed to do this. For me. Not for her. I nodded. I appreciated that. The honesty. We talked for another 20 minutes. About nothing heavy. About work, about the city, about the Blazers' terrible season. It was strange sitting across from the man who married my sister, talking like acquaintances who might become friends. When we parted ways, he said, if you ever want to talk to her, really talk, I think she'd listen now. I didn't make any promises. Just said I'd think about it. That night, I pulled out Rachel's letter again. Read it a 3rd time. There was something in the way she wrote about missing me that felt real. Not performative. Not manipulative. Just sad. Like she'd lost something she didn't know how to get back. I thought about writing back. Drafting responses in my head. But every version felt either too cold or too forgiving. I didn't want to pretend everything was fine. But I also didn't want to hold on to anger that was eating me from the inside. So I did something different. I called Dr. Patel and scheduled an extra session. We talked about forgiveness. Not the kind where you pretend nothing happened, but the kind where you acknowledge the hurt and decide it doesn't get to define you anymore. She asked me what I wanted, not what I thought I should want, not what would make me look good or generous or mature, just what I actually wanted. I thought about it for a long time. I want them to understand, I finally said. I want them to see what they did. Not so they'll grovel or beg me to come back, but so they'll know, so they'll carry it, so they'll do better with the people they have left. She nodded. That's fair. But you can't control whether they understand. You can only control whether you're still waiting for them to. That hit me harder than I expected. Because she was right. I was still waiting. Still hoping that one day they'd wake up and realize what they'd lost. That they'd come to me with real apologies and real change and real understanding. But what if they never did? What if they went the rest of their lives believing they were the victims in this story? Could I live with that? I didn't know. But I was starting to think I'd have to. Dr. Patel gave me homework. Write a letter to each of them. Not to send. Just to write. Say everything I needed to say without worrying about their reactions or whether it would fix anything. Just get it out. So I did. I spent a weekend writing. 4 letters. 1 to Mom. 1 to Dad. 1 to Rachel. 1 to Kevin. Each one was different. Mom's was the longest. I wrote about feeling invisible. About the years of showing up and being overlooked. About the phone call that uninvited me and how casually she delivered it. About the house and the betrayal and the realization that she'd never seen me as a son, just a solution. I wrote about the album she sent and how it made me sad more than angry, because it showed we'd once had something real, and she'd let it dissolve into transactions. Dad's letter was shorter. Angrier. I wrote about his toast at family dinners where he'd brag about Rachel's achievements and Kevin's potential but never mention mine. About how he taught me that success without a traditional path didn't count. About the text he sent saying I'd regret this and how wrong he was. I didn't regret it. I regretted all the years I spent trying to earn his respect when he'd already decided I wasn't worth it. Rachel's letter was the hardest. Because I didn't hate her. I was angry, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But underneath all of that was grief. Grief for the relationship we used to have. For the sister who used to call me just to talk, not just when she needed something. I wrote about the wedding. About being erased from the narrative while funding the whole story. About the letter she sent and how much I wanted to believe it but couldn't trust it. About how I missed her but didn't know if the person I missed still existed. Kevin's letter was sad. He'd always been the baby of the family. The one everyone protected and enabled. I wrote about watching him drift through life without consequences because someone always caught him. Usually me. I wrote about the coffee shop conversation and how he said he understood but I didn't think he really did. Understanding requires change. And as far as I knew, he was still the same Kevin. Still asking, still taking, just asking someone else now. When I finished writing, I felt lighter. Not healed, but less heavy. I put the letters in a folder and filed them away. I didn't need to send them. They'd already served their purpose. They helped me say what I needed to say, even if no one else would hear it. 2 years after the wedding, I was invited to speak at a tech conference in San Francisco. It was a big deal. The kind of opportunity that could raise my company's profile significantly. I accepted and spent weeks preparing my presentation. It was about scaling small businesses, about taking risks, about building something sustainable without losing yourself in the process. The day of the talk, I was backstage going over my notes when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hey Marcus. It's Rachel. I know this is random, but I saw you're speaking at TechConnect today. I'm in the city for work. Would love to see you if you have time. No pressure. I stared at the message. My first instinct was to ignore it, to focus on my talk and not let this distract me. But something made me respond. I'm speaking at 2. Free after 3 if you want to meet. Her reply came immediately. I'll be there. She didn't come to my talk. At least I didn't see her in the audience. But when I walked off stage after what might have been the best presentation of my life, she was waiting in the hallway. She looked different. Older, more tired. Her hair was shorter. She wasn't wearing the kind of polished outfit she used to favor. Just jeans and a sweater. She looked more real somehow. Marcus, she said. That was incredible. I wasn't expecting the compliment. Threw me off balance. Thanks. We stood there awkwardly. Two people who used to know everything about each other, now strangers with shared history. Want to grab a drink? She asked. I hesitated, then nodded. We found a quiet bar a few blocks away. Ordered drinks. Sat across from each other in a booth that felt too small and too big all at once. She spoke first. I'm not going to pretend this isn't weird. It is weird, I agreed. She smiled. A sad small smile. I've started therapy. Been going for about 8 months now. It's helped. Helped me see a lot of things I didn't want to see. Like what? Like how selfish I was. How entitled. How I treated you like a bank and not a brother. She looked down at her drink. Derek told me he met with you 2 years ago. I was mad at first. But then I realized he did what I should have done. He apologized. I didn't say anything. She continued. I've been trying to figure out how to reach out. What to say. How to make it right. But everything I came up with felt empty. Like words couldn't fix what I broke. She looked up at me. So I decided to just be honest. I messed up. I took advantage of you. I let Mom and Dad treat you like you were less important because it benefited me. And when you finally stood up for yourself, I punished you for it. I called you selfish and dramatic and acted like you were the problem. But you weren't. I was. We all were. I listened. Waited for the but. The justification. The pivot to how hard things have been for her. It didn't come. She just sat there looking at me with eyes that actually seemed to see me for the first time in years. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. I don't even know if I deserve the chance to ask. But I wanted you to know that I know. I know what I did. And I'm sorry. It was the apology I'd been waiting for. But hearing it didn't feel the way I thought it would. It didn't fix anything. Didn't erase the hurt. Just existed. A statement of fact. I took a sip of my drink. What do you want from me, Rachel? Nothing, she said. I'm not here to ask you to come back. Or to forgive me. Or to fix our relationship. I'm just here to tell you I'm sorry and that I saw your talk and I'm proud of you. Even if I have no right to be. We talked for another hour. Not about the past. About our lives now. She told me about her job, about the struggles in her marriage, about realizing she built a life that looked good on paper but felt empty. I told her about my company, about the deals I'd closed, about finding a version of myself I actually liked. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in a decade. When we parted ways, she hugged me. It was brief, a little stiff, but real. Take care of yourself, Marcus, she said. You too, I replied. I didn't know if we'd ever be close again. Didn't know if I even wanted that. But walking away from that bar, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. Acceptance that people are complicated. That they can hurt you deeply and still love you in their broken way. That you can acknowledge the damage without letting it define you. I flew home the next day. Went back to work. Back to my life. The life I'd built without them. And it was enough. More than enough. It was mine. 3 years after the wedding, my company hit a milestone. 50 employees. 10 million in revenue. An office space that didn't feel like we were playing dress up in a borrowed suit. We threw a party. Invited clients, partners, friends. I gave a speech thanking everyone who'd helped build this. Jamie. My developers. My early clients who took a chance on an unknown firm. I didn't mention my family. Not because I was bitter. But because they hadn't been part of this story. This success was mine. Built on my terms. Without their approval or their money or their validation. And that made it sweeter than any version that included them ever could have been. At the end of the night, after everyone had left and I was cleaning up, I found myself thinking about that day at the coffee shop with my mom. When she asked if I regretted what I'd done, I'd said no then. And I still meant it now. I didn't regret walking away. I didn't regret pulling my money. I didn't regret setting boundaries that protected me even when they hurt other people. Because the alternative was disappearing. And I'd done that for too long already. I locked up the office and walked to my car. The city was quiet. Peaceful. I drove home through empty streets, windows down, music playing. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt completely, entirely, unapologetically free. The years that followed were good ones. Not perfect, but good. I dated. Had relationships that didn't work out but taught me things. I traveled to places I'd always wanted to see. I invested in other small businesses run by people like me who just needed someone to believe in them. I became the mentor I'd wished I'd had. And slowly the hurt faded. Not completely. Hurt like that leaves a mark. But it stopped being the loudest thing in my head. I heard from Rachel occasionally. A text on my birthday. A congratulations when the company got written up in a tech magazine. I responded. Kept it cordial. We weren't close, but we weren't enemies either. We were just two people who used to be family and were now something else. Something undefined. Kevin reached out once. Asked if we could talk. I agreed. We met at the same coffee shop where we'd met years before. He looked better. More stable. He'd gotten a job. A real one. Was seeing someone seriously. Making plans. He didn't ask for money. Didn't ask for anything except maybe a chance to explain. He told me he'd hit rock bottom after I cut ties. That losing my support forced him to figure things out. That it was the worst thing that ever happened to him. I'm not saying thank you, he said. Because what I did, that wasn't okay. But I needed to tell you that I get it now. Why you left. Why you had to. I believed him. Or at least I believed he believed it. We didn't become close. But we stayed in contact. Small texts here and there. Updates on life. It was more than I expected and less than it used to be. And that felt right. My parents and I never reconciled. I saw my dad once by accident at a hardware store. We made eye contact across the aisle. He looked older. Grayer. Smaller somehow. He nodded. I nodded back. We didn't speak. Just went our separate ways. My mom sent a card every Christmas. Never wrote much. Just signed her name. I didn't respond. Didn't throw them away either. Just filed them in a drawer with all the other pieces of a past I'd moved on from but couldn't quite forget. 5 years after the wedding, I stood in my office looking out at the city and thought about how different my life looked. How different I felt. I wasn't angry anymore. Wasn't bitter. I built something real. Something mine. Something that didn't require me to shrink or sacrifice or disappear. I thought about the version of myself who used to say yes to everything, who measured his worth by how useful he could be, who believed that love required endless giving. And I felt sorry for him. Not in a pitying way, but in a compassionate way. He was doing the best he could with what he knew. He just didn't know yet that he was allowed to stop. I'd learned that boundaries aren't cruel. That walking away isn't selfish. That protecting yourself doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a person. One who understands that you can't pour from an empty cup, and that running yourself dry doesn't prove love. It just proves you're willing to disappear. And I wasn't willing anymore. I existed now. Loudly. Unapologetically. Without asking permission or waiting for approval. I existed on my own terms. And that, I'd learned, was the only way worth existing. Some people might read this and think I'm cold. That I gave up on family too easily. That I should have fought harder or forgiven faster or given more chances. But those people haven't spent years being the person everyone leans on and no one sees. They haven't felt the specific ache of being needed but not valued. They haven't stood in the room watching people laugh at their expense while wearing clothes they paid for. So I don't need them to understand. I just need them to respect that my choice was mine to make. And I made it. Not out of spite. Not out of revenge. But out of survival. Because staying would have killed something in me. Something I wasn't willing to lose. My sense of self. My worth. My understanding that I mattered as more than what I could provide. It chose me. And I'd choose me again. Every single time. 7 years had passed since that phone call. The one where my mother told me it would be easier if I didn't come to Rachel's wedding. 7 years since I pulled every dollar I'd committed and walked away from a family that had stopped seeing me as anything more than a financial resource. In that time, I'd built something I never thought possible. Not just a successful company, but a life I actually wanted to wake up to. My firm had expanded to 4 cities. We'd been featured in Forbes and TechCrunch. I'd spoken at conferences across the country and mentored dozens of young entrepreneurs trying to do what I'd done. Built something from nothing. But success has a funny way of bringing ghosts back to your door. I was in my corner office on a Wednesday afternoon, reviewing quarterly projections with my CFO, when Jamie knocked. She had that look on her face again. The one that meant someone unexpected was here. Your father is. Downstairs, she said quietly. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent. I felt my chest tighten. 7 years of silence, and he shows up unannounced at my office. I glanced at my CFO, Daniel, who was watching me carefully. We can pick this up later, he offered. I nodded. Tell him I'll be down in 5 minutes. I took those 5 minutes to breathe, to remind myself that I wasn't that person anymore. The one who jumped at every family emergency. The one who dropped everything to fix their problems. I was someone else now. Someone with boundaries. Someone who understood that urgent for them didn't mean urgent for me. When I stepped off the elevator into the lobby, my father was standing by the window. He looked older than I remembered. His hair had gone completely white and he'd lost weight. He was wearing a jacket I recognized from years ago, slightly worn at the elbows. When he turned and saw me, something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe. Or surprise that I'd actually come down. Marcus, he said. His voice was rougher than I remembered. Thank you for seeing me. I didn't move closer. Just stood there with my hands in my pockets. What do you want, Dad? He flinched at the directness. Maybe he'd expected me to make it easier for him. To smooth over the awkwardness like I used to. Can we talk somewhere private? I considered saying no. Considered telling him he'd had 7 years to talk and had chosen silence. But curiosity won out. There's a conference room on the 2nd floor. He followed me upstairs. We sat across from each other at a table that had hosted million-dollar negotiations. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. He kept looking around the room at the view of the river, at the framed awards on the wall. You've done well for yourself, he finally said. I didn't thank him. Just waited. He cleared his throat. I'm not here to ask for money. I felt my eyebrows raise. That was a first. Then why are you here? He looked down at his hands. Hands that used to seem so strong when I was a kid. Now they just looked old. Your mother is sick. The words hung in the air between us. I didn't react. Didn't gasp or lean forward or ask what was wrong. I just sat there waiting for him to continue. She has cancer. Pancreatic. They caught it late. The doctors are saying maybe 6 months, probably less. He looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in my father's eyes before. Fear. She wants to see you. I felt a strange emptiness where I thought emotion should be. Not coldness exactly. Just distance. Like he was telling me about a stranger. Why now? I asked. Because she's dying, he said, voice cracking slightly. Because she has things she wants to say to you. Things I have, things I need to say. I leaned back in my chair. You've had 7 years to say whatever you needed to say. He nodded slowly. I know we have. We were wrong, Marcus. About everything. About how we treated you. About the wedding. About the house. About all of it. We were so wrong and I don't know how to fix it. I felt something stir in my chest. Not forgiveness. Something harder. You can't fix it. He looked like I'd slapped him. What? You can't fix it, I repeated. It's not a problem that needs solving. It's just what happened. It's the choice you made. The choice all of you made. You decided I wasn't important enough to include in my own sister's wedding. You tried to steal my house. You treated me like an ATM for years and then discarded me when I finally said no. Those are facts. They don't get fixed. They just exist. But she's dying, he said. And I heard the desperation creeping in. Don't you want to say goodbye? Make peace? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Did I want to see my mother one last time? Did I want to sit by her bedside and hear whatever deathbed confession she'd prepared? Did I want to give her the absolution she was probably hoping for? The answer surprised me. I don't know, I said honestly. Part of me does. Part of me wants to hear what she has to say. But another part of me, the bigger part, knows that seeing her won't change anything. It won't undo the hurt. It won't make the last 7 years disappear. It'll just be sad and uncomfortable and probably painful for both of us. So I don't know if I want that. My father's face crumpled. How can you be so cold? She's your mother. And you're my father, I said, my voice steady. But that didn't stop you from laughing when I wasn't invited to Rachel's wedding. It didn't stop you from trying to steal property I owned. It didn't stop you from treating me like I was disposable. Being family isn't magic. It doesn't erase consequences. He stood up abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. I came here hoping you'd grown up. That you'd moved past this childish grudge. But you're still the same selfish, ungrateful person you always were. There it was. The real reason he'd come. Not to apologize. Not to make amends. But to blame me one more time for not being who they needed me to be. I stood up too calm, controlled. I'm not the same person, Dad. I'm better. I'm healthier. I'm successful. I'm surrounded by people who value me. And I got here by cutting out the people who didn't. Including you. He stared at me, breathing hard. When she's gone, you're going to regret this. Maybe, I said. But that's my burden to carry, not yours. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting. I walked to the door and opened it. He stood there for another moment like he was waiting for me to crack. To change my mind. When I didn't, he walked past me without another word. I went back to my office and closed the door. Sat down at my desk and stared at nothing for a long time. Jamie knocked eventually. You okay? Not really, I admitted. But I will be. That night I called Dr. Patel. Had an emergency session over the phone. She listened while I told her everything. The visit. The news about my mother. My father's anger. When I finished, she asked me the question I'd been avoiding. What do you feel? I thought about it. Sad. Guilty. Relieved. Angry. All of it at once. That's normal, she said. Grief is complicated even when the relationship was complicated. Especially then. Do you think I should see her? That's not a question I can answer for you, she said. But I can ask you this. If you do see her, what are you hoping will happen? What do you need from that conversation? I didn't have an answer. I think that's okay too, she continued. You don't have to decide right now. You don't have to decide at all if you don't want to. Whatever choice you make it for you. Not for her. Not for your father or your siblings. For you. We talked for another hour. By the time we hung up, I didn't feel better exactly. But I felt clearer. I spent the next few days wrestling with the decision. Part of me wanted to be the bigger person. To show up and let her say whatever she needed to say. To prove I wasn't as cold as my father claimed. But another part of me, the part that had spent years learning to protect itself, knew that going back might undo the healing I'd worked so hard to achieve. 3 days after my father's visit, I got a text from Rachel. Dad told me he went to see you. I'm sorry he ambushed you like that. If you want to talk, I'm here. No pressure. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. How is she? Weak. In pain. Scared. She's been asking for you. What does she want to say? Rachel's response took a few minutes. I don't know exactly. But I think she wants to apologize. Actually apologize. Not the half apologies we're used to. I set my phone down. Picked it up again. Typed and deleted several responses before settling on one. I need time to think about it. Her reply was immediate. I understand. Take all the time you need. Just know that it would mean a lot to her. And to me. Even if you only come once. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Derek. We'd stayed in loose contact over the years. Nothing deep but friendly. He answered on the second ring. Marcus. Hey. I heard Dad showed up at your office. He did. How are you holding up? I asked. He sighed. It's hard. Watching someone die is always hard. Even when the relationship was complicated. Is Rachel okay? She's managing. Trying to be strong for everyone. You know how she is. I did know. Rachel had always been the fixer in her own way. The one who tried to hold everyone together, even when everything was falling apart. It's one of the reasons we'd clashed so much. We both tried to solve problems just in different ways. Can I ask you something? I said. Of course. Do you think I should go see her? Silence on the other end. Then honestly, I think that's entirely up to you. If you go and it helps you find closure, great. If you don't go and you're at peace with that decision, also great. But if you go because you feel obligated or guilty, it's going to eat at you. And if you don't go and you regret it later, that'll eat at you too. So the real question is, which regret can you live with better? That hit me. Which regret could I live with? The regret of going and reopening wounds? Or the regret of not going and always wondering what she might have said? I didn't know. I thanked Derek and hung up. That weekend, I drove out to the coast. Same beach where that photo of Rachel and me had been taken all those years ago. I walked along the shore, hands in my pockets, watching the waves crash against the rocks. I thought about my mother, about the woman who raised me, who taught me to read and helped me with homework and cheered at my soccer games. That version of her had existed once, before the expectations and the disappointments and the slow transformation of love into transaction. Could I separate those two versions? The mother I'd had and the mother I'd lost? Or were they always the same person, just showing different faces depending on what served her? I sat on a piece of driftwood and watched the sun start to set. Pulled out my phone and opened the Photos app. Scrolled back years until I found it. The picture my mother had sent. Me and Rachel by the tide pool. Two kids who didn't know yet how complicated everything would become. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I made my decision. I called Rachel. Are you free tomorrow? I need to see her. She let out a breath. Yes. Yes, of course. Come by around 2. She's usually more alert then. I hung up before I could change my mind. The next day, I drove to my parents' house. The house I'd bought. The one they'd tried to give away. It looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was chipping on the shutters. The garden my mother used to tend was overgrown. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, debating whether to go through with it. Finally, I got out. Rachel opened the door before I could knock. She looked exhausted, worn down in a way that made her seem older than her years. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. She's in the bedroom. Dad's at the store. Kevin's at work. Just us. Good, I said. I didn't want an audience for this. I followed Rachel down the hallway. The house smelled different. Sterile. Like hospitals and medicine. She stopped outside a closed door. She knows you're coming. Just be gentle. She's really fragile. I nodded. Rachel opened the door and I stepped inside. My mother was in bed, propped up by pillows. She looked nothing like the woman I remembered. She'd always been small, but now she seemed tiny. Shrunken. Her skin was pale, almost translucent. Her eyes were closed. Mom, Rachel said softly. Marcus is here. My mother's eyes opened slowly. When she saw me, tears immediately started falling. Marcus. Her voice was weak, barely above a whisper. I'll give you two some privacy, Rachel said, and slipped out of the room. I stood there awkwardly, not sure where to go or what to do. My mother patted the bed beside her. Sit, please. I pulled a chair closer instead. Kept the distance. She noticed but didn't comment. Thank you for coming. I didn't know if you would. I almost didn't, I said honestly. She nodded weakly. I deserve that. You deserve a lot worse than that, actually. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, there was something raw in her expression. I've had a lot of time to think. Lying here. Too much time. And I keep coming back to the same thing. I failed you. Not just at the wedding. Before that. For years. I taught you that your value was in what you could provide. That love was conditional. That you had to earn your place in this family. And that was wrong. So deeply wrong. I felt my throat tighten but kept my voice steady. Why did you do it? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Started so small. You were always so capable. So independent. You didn't need us the way Rachel and Kevin did. Or at least that's what I told myself. It was easier to focus on them because they needed more help. And you just handled everything on your own. But I see now that needing help and deserving attention aren't the same thing. You deserve to be seen. To be valued. And we didn't give you that. I asked for it, I said. Multiple times. I told you I felt invisible. I told you I was tired. You brushed it off every time. I know, she whispered. I know I did. I convinced myself you were being dramatic. That you'd get over it. I didn't want to look at my part in it. Didn't want to admit that I was using you. Because if I admitted that, I'd have to admit I was a bad mother. And I couldn't face that. So I just kept taking and telling myself you were fine with it. Even when it was obvious you weren't. The tears were coming faster now. When Richard came home and told me what you'd done, pulling the money from the wedding, I was furious. I called you selfish and ungrateful. But late at night, when everyone was asleep, I knew the truth. You weren't selfish. You were finally protecting yourself. And we hated you for it because it meant we had to face what we'd done. I sat there listening. Part of me wanted to interrupt. To argue or defend or throw all the hurt back in her face. But I didn't. I just let her talk. The wedding, she continued. That phone call. Telling you not to come. That was the worst thing I've ever done. And I've replayed it in my mind 1,000 times since. I told myself we were protecting you, that you'd be uncomfortable. But that was a lie. The truth was we didn't want you there because we knew we'd have to face you. Face what we'd taken. It was easier to exclude you than to acknowledge you. And I will regret that for whatever time I have left. She reached out a trembling hand toward me. I didn't take it. I'm not here to forgive you, I said quietly. She nodded. I know. I'm not asking for that. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see what we did to you. And I'm sorry. So deeply sorry. We sat in silence. The only sound was her labored breathing and the faint hum of medical equipment. Finally I spoke. I spent years trying to earn your love. Trying to prove I was worth keeping. And no matter what I did, it was never enough. Do you know what that does to a person? To constantly give and never receive? To be needed but never valued? She nodded, more tears falling. I do now. Too late, I said. But you do. She looked at me with devastation in her eyes. Is there anything I can do? Anything at all? I thought about it. Really thought about it. No. There's nothing you can do. The damage is done. The years are gone. We can't get them back. But I can tell you this. I'm okay now. I built a life without you. A good life. And I'm proud of it. I'm proud of who I became when I stopped trying to be who you needed. That has to be enough for both of us. I stood up. She looked panicked. Are you leaving? I am. But I came. I heard you. And maybe that's all we get. She was crying fully now. Will you come back? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. I haven't decided yet. But if this is the last time I see you, I want you to know something. I don't hate you. I'm not glad you're sick. But I'm also not going to pretend the last 7 years didn't happen. You made choices. I made choices. And we both have to live with them. Or in your case, die with them. It sounded harsh. Maybe it was. But it was also true. I walked to the door. Stopped with my hand on the handle. She called my name one more time. Marcus. I love you. I always have. Even when I didn't show it. I looked back at her. That broken, dying woman who was my mother. I believe you. I just wish love had been enough. And I left. Rachel was waiting in the hallway. She looked at my face and knew. Did you get what you needed? She asked softly. I got what I could, I replied. That'll have to do. I hugged her briefly. Then I walked out of that house for what might be the last time. I drove home in silence. No music. No podcast. Just me and my thoughts. When I got back to my apartment, I poured a drink and sat on my balcony watching the city lights. I thought about everything my mother had said. The apology. The admission of guilt. The tears. And I realized something. It helped. Not in the way I expected. It didn't erase the hurt or make everything okay. But it helped to hear her acknowledge it. To know that somewhere in her dying mind, she understood what she'd done. That was more than I thought I'd get. More than I'd had 7 years ago when I walked away. Maybe that was closure. Not the Hollywood version where everyone hugs and cries and everything is fixed. But the real version. Where you acknowledge the damage, accept that it can't be undone, and move forward anyway. My mother died 3 weeks later. Rachel called to tell me. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed. I stepped out and answered. She's gone, Rachel said. She went peacefully. This morning. Are you okay? I asked. Not really. But I will be. The funeral is on Saturday. Will you come? I thought about it. Considered skipping it. Considered showing up. Considered every option in between. I'll be there. I heard her breath catch. Thank you. I need to get back to work, I said. But call me if you need anything. I mean it. Okay. Marcus. Yeah. I'm glad you came to see her. I'm glad too. The funeral was small. Immediate family and a handful of friends. I sat in the back. Didn't speak. Didn't cry. Just observed. Watched my father grieve the wife he'd had for 40 years. Watched Kevin struggle to hold it together. Watched Rachel deliver a eulogy that was beautiful and sad and mostly true. When it was over, people came up to me. Extended condolences. Said generic things about how hard this must be. I nodded and thanked them and kept my distance. My father approached me at the end. We stood facing each other. Two men who'd never really understood each other. I'm sorry, he said, for how I acted at your office. You were right. About all of it. I didn't respond. He continued. Your mother made me promise to tell you something. She said to tell you she was proud of you, of what you built, of who you became. That even though she didn't show it, she always knew you were going to do something special. I felt my chest tighten. Thanks for telling me. He nodded. For what it's worth, I'm proud too. It's not worth much, I said honestly, but I appreciate you saying it. We stood there another moment. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't attend the reception. Just got in my car and drove home. Spent the rest of the day in my apartment, sitting with my thoughts, processing the strange mixture of grief and relief and finality. That night, I pulled out the folder where I'd kept those letters. The ones I'd written years ago and never sent. I read them all again. Then I took them to my fireplace and burned them, one by one. Watched the words I'd needed to say turn to ash. I didn't need them anymore. They'd served their purpose. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter, like I'd been carrying something heavy without realizing it. And overnight, someone had lifted it off my shoulders. I went to work. Had a productive day. Laughed at a joke Daniel told during our strategy meeting. Made plans to grab dinner with Jamie and some of the team. Normal things. Good things. Things that had nothing to do with my family or my past or the complicated grief I was still processing. That's the thing about healing. It's not linear. It's not dramatic. Most days it just looks like getting up and moving forward and choosing yourself again and again. Some days are harder than others. But slowly, imperceptibly, the weight gets lighter. The hurt gets smaller. The past stops controlling the present. And one day you wake up and realize you're actually okay. Not pretending. Not performing. Actually okay. That was where I was now. 7 years after walking away. 7 years after choosing myself. 7 years after learning that love without respect is just manipulation dressed up in sentiment. I was okay. Better than okay. I was free. Months passed. A year. Life continued. My company kept growing. I bought a house with a view of the mountains. Started dating someone who actually saw me. Someone who didn't need me to be anything other than who I was. Her name was Sophia. She was an architect. Smart, funny, independent. She had her own money, her own life, her own sense of self. When I told her about my family, about everything that had happened, she listened without judgment. Then she said something that stuck with me. You can't pour from an empty cup. And you were empty for a long time. I'm glad you filled yourself back up. I asked her once if she thought I was cold. For not reconciling with my family before my mother died. For maintaining boundaries even in her final days. She thought about it. Then said, you're not cold. You're self-aware. There's a difference. Cold people don't care. You care. You just learn to care about yourself too. Rachel and I maintained contact. Not close but cordial. We'd have coffee every few months. Talk about surface things mostly. Work, weather, life updates. Sometimes we'd venture into deeper territory. She told me once that watching me walk away had changed her. Made her realize how much she'd taken for granted. That she was trying to be better. With Derek. With herself. I believed her. Kevin and I texted occasionally. He'd gotten married. Had a kid. Was building a life that looked more stable than anything I'd seen from him before. He sent me a photo once of his daughter. Said he wanted her to grow up knowing her uncle. I didn't respond right away. Took me a week to figure out what to say. Eventually I sent back, she's beautiful. Let's grab coffee soon. We did. It was awkward but not hostile. He told me he was in therapy. Working through a lot of stuff. Trying to break patterns he'd learned growing up. I'm not asking you to forget what I did, he said. Or even forgive it. I just want you to know I'm trying to be different. That matters, I told him. And I meant it. My father and I never reconciled. We saw each other at Rachel's birthday dinner a few years after my mother's death. Nodded at each other across the table. Didn't speak. Rachel looked between us hopefully, but neither of us made a move. Some things are just broken. And that's okay. Not every relationship deserves to be saved. Not every connection is worth maintaining. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is let it stay broken and build something new instead. That's what I did. built something new. A life that reflected my values, my boundaries, my worth. And it was good. Really good. The kind of good that comes from knowing yourself and refusing to compromise on the things that matter. The kind of good that comes from surrounding yourself with people who celebrate you, not just tolerate you. The kind of good that comes from finally understanding that you deserve to take up space in your own life. Looking back now, I don't regret walking away. Not for a second. I regret that it had to happen. I regret the years of pain that led to it. But I don't regret the choice itself. Because that choice saved me. It taught me that I mattered. That my well-being wasn't negotiable. That family isn't an excuse for mistreatment, and blood doesn't entitle anyone to bleed you dry. I learned that boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges. Bridges to healthier relationships with people who respect them. And I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Not because you don't care, but because you finally care enough about yourself to stop accepting less than you deserve. So if you're reading this and you're in a situation like I was, where you're giving and never receiving, where you're invisible to the people who should see you most clearly, where you're exhausted from carrying everyone else's burdens while your own go unnoticed, I want to tell you something. It's okay to stop. It's okay to say no. It's okay to protect yourself even when it disappoints other people. Especially when it disappoints other people. Because you matter. Your peace matters. Your mental health matters. Your life matters. And you don't owe anyone access to it just because they're family. You get to choose who stays in your life. And you get to choose yourself. Every single time. Without apology. Without guilt. Without shame. Choose yourself. I did. And it was the best decision I ever made. 10 years after the wedding I wasn't invited to, I stood in front of 200 people at a tech summit in Austin, Texas, delivering the keynote address. The topic was resilience in entrepreneurship, but what I was really talking about was survival. How to build something meaningful when the people closest to you don't believe in you. How to keep going when your support system becomes the thing you need support from. How to choose yourself when everyone else has chosen to overlook you. The audience didn't know the specifics of my story. I'd never publicly shared the details of what happened with my family. But I spoke in broad strokes about toxic relationships, about financial exploitation disguised as family duty, about the courage it takes to walk away from people you love when staying means losing yourself. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. But what struck me most was what happened after. During the networking session, dozens of people approached me. Not to talk about software or business strategies, but to share their own stories. A woman in her 40s told me about supporting her siblings through college, only to be excluded from family gatherings, because she didn't have children. A young man described funding his parents' retirement, while they constantly criticized his life choices. An older gentleman talked about decades of being the family bank before his children stopped calling except when they needed money. Each story was different in its details but identical in its core. People who'd been used. People who'd been taken for granted. People who'd finally chosen themselves and were still processing the guilt and grief that came with it. One woman, probably in her mid-30s, waited until almost everyone had left before approaching me. She had tears in her eyes. "I'm still in it," she said quietly. "Still saying yes. Still depleting myself. Still hoping they'll see me. And hearing you talk today, I realize they never will. Not unless I force them to by removing myself from the equation." I asked her what was holding her back. She looked down at her hands. Fear. Fear that I'm the problem. That I'm selfish. That I'll regret it. That I'll end up alone. I understood that fear intimately. It had kept me trapped for years. I told her something Dr. Patel had told me once. "You're already alone. You're just surrounded by people who make you feel that way. Real aloneness is when you're isolated. What you have now is something worse. You're lonely in a crowd of people who should love you." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "How did you know you were making the right choice?" I thought about that question carefully. Because it was the question, wasn't it? The one that kept people stuck in toxic dynamics for years, sometimes decades. How do you know when to fight for a relationship and when to walk away? How do you distinguish between temporary conflict and permanent dysfunction? I told her the truth. I didn't know it was the right choice when I made it. I just knew that staying was killing me slowly. And I decided that even if leaving was wrong, it couldn't be worse than the slow death I was already experiencing. Sometimes you don't choose the right path. You just choose the path that lets you keep breathing. She thanked me, and I watched her walk away, hoping she'd find the strength to do what I'd done, hoping it wouldn't take her as long as it took me. That night in my hotel room, I thought about the trajectory of the last decade. How drastically my life had changed. How different I felt. Not just successful in business terms, though that was true, but successful in the ways that actually mattered. I had friendships built on mutual respect. I had a partner who valued me. I had employees who appreciated me not because of what I gave them materially, but because of how I led, how I listened, how I invested in their growth. I had therapy tools that helped me navigate difficult emotions. I had boundaries that protected my peace. I had a life I designed intentionally rather than one that had been thrust upon me by other people's expectations and demands. Sophia and I had been together for 3 years by then. We'd moved in together a year prior, into a house we'd chosen together. Not my house or her house, but ours. It was a small distinction that felt enormous. For so much of my life, everything had been mine alone. My achievements, my struggles, my decisions. Learning to share space with someone, to build something collaboratively, to trust that partnership didn't mean exploitation, that had been its own journey. Sophia had been patient with me, understanding when I pulled back or got defensive or struggled to accept help. She never pushed, never demanded, never made me feel like I owed her anything for loving me. And slowly, I learned that love didn't have to be transactional, that giving could be mutual, that I could receive without it being a trap. We talked about marriage, not in the traditional sense of timelines and expectations, but in the philosophical sense of what it would mean, what we wanted from a lifelong partnership, what scared us, what we hoped for. Sophia told me once that she admired how I'd rebuilt myself, that she could see the work I'd done, the intentionality I brought to relationships now, the way I refused to repeat old patterns. But she also said something that challenged me. You've gotten so good at protecting yourself that sometimes I wonder if you've left any room for me to reach you. That hurt to hear. But it was also true. I'd built walls so high to keep out the people who'd hurt me that I'd accidentally built them around everyone, including people who had no intention of causing harm. That became my work in therapy over the following months. Learning to distinguish between healthy boundaries and defensive fortresses. Understanding that vulnerability wasn't weakness. Recognizing that not everyone would exploit my openness the way my family had. It was harder than I expected. Unlearning survival mechanisms that had kept me safe felt dangerous. Like removing armor before confirming the battle was over. But I did it. Slowly. Imperfectly. With Sophia's support and Dr. Patel's guidance and my own determination not to let my past dictate my future forever. I started sharing more. Asking for help when I needed it. Accepting support without calculating what I'd owe in return. And gradually I felt the walls come down. Not completely. I didn't think they ever would. But enough. Enough to let real intimacy in. Enough to build something sustainable. Around the same time, something unexpected happened. Kevin reached out and asked if we could have a serious conversation. We met at a coffee shop, the same one we'd met at years before. He looked different. More settled. Less chaotic. He ordered for both of us, remembered how I took my coffee, and that small gesture felt significant. When we sat down, he didn't waste time with small talk. I've been working with a therapist who specializes in family systems, he started. And we've been unpacking a lot. About mom and dad. About the dynamics in our house growing up. About how we all played into it. He paused. About what we did to you. I listened, not sure where this was going. She helped me see that I was trained from a young age to be helpless. That mom and dad enabled my dependence because it made them feel needed. And when you started being successful, when you started being the capable one, they resented it. Because your independence meant they couldn't control you the way they controlled me and Rachel. So they did the next best thing. They made you useful. Turned you into a resource. And I went along with it because it benefited me. I took from you for years without ever stopping to think about what it cost you. I didn't interrupt, just let him continue. The wedding thing, he went on, that wasn't just about logistics or space or any of the excuses they gave. It was about punishment. You'd started saying no more often in the months before. You'd pushed back on a few requests. And they couldn't handle it. So they did the one thing they knew would hurt you most. They excluded you. Made you irrelevant. Showed you that your contributions didn't actually buy you a seat at the table. Hearing him lay it out so clearly was strange. It was everything I'd known, everything I'd felt, but hearing someone else, especially Kevin, articulate it validated something I'd sometimes doubted. Sometimes late at night, I'd wondered if I'd overreacted, if I'd been too sensitive, if I'd blown things out of proportion. But Kevin's words confirmed that no, I hadn't. It had been exactly as bad as I remembered. Worse even because it had been intentional. I asked him why he was telling me this now. Because I have a daughter, he said. And I look at her and I think about the family she's growing up in. About the patterns she'll learn. And I don't want her to learn what I learned. I don't want her to think it's okay to use people. Or that success makes you a target. Or that family means you're entitled to someone else's resources. He looked directly at me. I want to break the cycle. And I can't do that without acknowledging what the cycle did. Specifically what it did to you. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. Kevin was doing the work. Real work. Not performative apologies or surface-level regret, but actual deep examination of his role and his responsibility. That mattered. I told him I appreciated what he was saying. That it meant something to hear him take accountability without expecting anything in return. We talked for 2 hours. About our childhood, about the subtle and not so subtle ways we'd been pitted against each other, about the roles we'd been assigned and how those roles had shaped us. For the first time in over a decade, I felt like I was talking to my brother. Not the person who'd taken from me, but the person who'd been shaped by the same dysfunctional system I had. Just in a different way. Before we left, Kevin asked if there was any chance we could rebuild. Not go back to how things were, he clarified. But build something new. Something healthier. I told him the truth. I don't know. Maybe. But it would have to be different. It would have to respect the boundaries I've set. And it would require consistency. Not just one good conversation but sustained effort over time. He nodded. I understand. And I'm willing to do that. No expectations. Just effort. We left it there. Open-ended. Undefined. And somehow that felt right. Not forced. Not rushed. Just honest. Over the following year, Kevin followed through. He'd text occasionally. Nothing heavy. Just checking in. He'd send photos of his daughter. Invite me to casual things with no pressure. He respected when I said no and didn't guilt me for it. And slowly, tentatively, something started to build. Not the relationship we'd had before. That was gone. But something new. Something based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Rachel's journey was different. She'd gone through a rough patch in her marriage. She and Derek had separated for several months, gone to intensive couples therapy, and eventually reconciled. She told me about it over lunch one afternoon. Her voice tired but honest. I realized I was doing to Derek what our family did to you, she said. Taking him for granted. Assuming his support was infinite. Expecting him to carry things without acknowledgement. And when he finally broke and said he couldn't do it anymore, I had this moment of horrible clarity. This is what Marcus felt. This is what I did to my brother. And I hated myself for it. She asked if I'd ever truly forgiven her. I thought about it. I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, I said. I've let go of the active anger. I've stopped wishing things had been different. I've accepted what happened and moved forward. But forgive? That implies absolution. And I don't know if I can absolve you of something that fundamentally changed who I am. She nodded, eyes glistening. That's fair. She paused. Do you think we'll ever be close again? Like we were as kids? I looked at her, this woman who'd been my sister, my friend, my betrayer, my family. I don't think so. Too much has happened. But I think we can be something else. Something adult. Something honest. Maybe that's better anyway. Kids don't know how to have complicated relationships. Adults do. She smiled sadly. Maybe you're right. My father and I never reconciled. He passed away 5 years after my mother, sudden heart attack, no warning. Rachel called to tell me. I felt surprisingly little. Not relief, not sadness, just a neutral acknowledgement. He was gone. The man who'd laughed at me, who'd tried to steal from me, who'd called me ungrateful, who'd never once said he was proud until it was too late for it to matter. He was gone and I was okay. I went to his funeral. Sat in the same back row I'd sat in for my mother's. Listened to the eulogies that painted him as a devoted father and loving husband. Didn't contradict them. Let people have their version of him. After the service, an old family friend approached me. Your father loved you, you know. He just didn't know how to show it. I smiled politely. Maybe. But love without action is just a word. The friend looked taken aback, not sure how to respond. I excused myself and left. That night, Sophia asked me how I felt about it all. We were on the couch, her head on my shoulder, my hand in her hair. I'm relieved it's over, I admitted. The relationship was already dead. His actual death just made it official. Does that make me a bad person? She was quiet for a moment. Then no. It makes you honest. You can't mourn a relationship that never existed. You can only mourn the one you wish you'd had. And maybe you already did that mourning years ago. She was right. I'd grieved my parents long before they died. Grieved the parents I'd needed and never had. Grieved the family I'd wanted and never got. Their physical deaths were just logistics. The real loss had happened years earlier. 9 years into my relationship with Sophia, I proposed. Not in some grand public gesture, but quietly, privately, in our kitchen on a random Tuesday night. We were cooking dinner together, something we did most evenings, and I just looked at her and thought, this is it. This is the partnership I want for the rest of my life. So I asked. No ring, no plan, just a question. Will you marry me? She looked up from the vegetables she was chopping, surprised. Are you serious right now? Completely serious. She set down the knife and came over to me. Yes. Obviously yes. We got married 6 months later. Small ceremony. 40 people. Our closest friends, a few colleagues, Sophia's family, and from my side just Rachel, Derek, Kevin, and his wife. That was it. No drama. No expectations. No one demanding I fund anything or include people who'd hurt me. Just people who loved us and wanted to celebrate with us. During the reception, Rachel pulled me aside. I'm happy for you, she said. You deserve this. You deserve someone who sees you. Thank you. She hesitated, then continued. I know I'll never be in your inner circle again. I know I lost that right. But I want you to know I'm grateful you've let me stay on the periphery. That you didn't cut me out completely. I could have, I said. Would have been justified. I know. So why didn't you? Because despite everything, you did the work. You took accountability. You changed. Not for me but for yourself. And I respect that. She hugged me then and I let her. It wasn't the way we used to hug as kids. It was different. More careful. More conscious. But it was real. And that was enough. Kevin gave a toast at the reception. He kept it light, funny, but at the end he said something that stuck with me. My brother taught me that you can love your family and still protect yourself from them. That boundaries aren't betrayal. That choosing yourself isn't selfish. He taught me that by example. And I'm still learning from him. People applauded, but I saw a few confused faces. People who didn't know the backstory. Who didn't understand what he was really saying. But the people who mattered knew. And that was all that counted. Sophia and I honeymooned in New Zealand. 2 weeks of hiking, exploring, disconnecting from work and obligations and everything else. On our last night, sitting on a beach watching the sunset, she asked me if I ever regretted how things turned out with my family. I thought about it carefully. I regret that it had to happen the way it did, I said. I regret the pain, the years of dysfunction, the loss of what could have been. But I don't regret walking away. That saved my life. She squeezed my hand. I'm glad you did. Otherwise you might not have been available when I met you. I laughed. Silver lining. She looked at me seriously. Can I ask you something? Always. Do you think you'll ever fully trust that I won't turn into them? That I won't start taking you for granted or using you? It was a hard question. One I'd avoided examining too closely. I trust you more than I've trusted anyone, I said. But do I have moments of fear? Yeah. Sometimes when you ask me for help with something, there's this split second where my brain goes into high alert. Where I'm scanning for signs of exploitation. It's not rational. It's just wired into me now. She nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. And I'm not offended by it. I just want you to know that I see it. And I'm always going to check in. Always going to make sure you're giving because you want to, not because you feel obligated. That's the difference, I said. With them, they never checked. They just took and assumed. You ask. You notice. You reciprocate. That changes everything. We sat in silence for a while watching the waves. Then she said, "You know what I admire most about you?" "What?" "That you didn't let what they did turn you into them. You could have become bitter, closed off, incapable of generosity. But you didn't. You still give. You still help people. You still show up for the people you love. You just do it with boundaries now. With awareness. That takes strength." I felt my throat tighten. Thank you for seeing that. Sometimes I worry I've overcorrected. That I've become too guarded. She shook her head. No. You've become appropriately cautious. There's a difference. The world needs people who are kind but not doormats. Generous but not self-sacrificing. Open but not vulnerable to exploitation. You figured out how to be all of those things. That's rare. When we returned home, I made a decision. I'd been thinking about it for months, maybe years, but hadn't been ready. Now I was. I reached out to a publisher who'd contacted me years ago about writing a book. They'd wanted me to write about entrepreneurship and tech innovation. But I had a different pitch. A book about family dysfunction, financial exploitation, and the courage it takes to walk away. About setting boundaries with people you love. About choosing yourself without apology. About rebuilding after burning bridges that were already crumbling. The publisher was interested. Very interested. They said books like that resonated with readers who felt trapped in similar dynamics, but didn't know they had options. Writing the book was harder than building my company. I had to excavate memories I'd rather have left buried. Relive conversations that still hurt. Examine my own role in letting things get as bad as they did. Dr. Patel helped me process it all. Helped me see that telling my story wasn't reopening wounds but rather documenting the healing. Took me 18 months to finish. The book came out 2 years after my wedding. We titled it The Invisible Contributor, and the tagline was "When Family Becomes Transaction." I didn't use real names. Changed identifying details. But the emotional truth was there. Every bit of it. The response was overwhelming. Not from critics, though they were generally positive, but from readers. I got thousands of messages, emails, social media posts, letters sent to my publisher. People thanking me for putting words to their experiences, for validating their feelings, for giving them permission to protect themselves. Some people told me the book had given them the courage to finally set boundaries. Others said it helped them understand a family member who'd walked away. A few said it made them realize they were the ones doing the exploiting and they needed to change. Those messages hit differently. Because that was the point, wasn't it? Not to villainize anyone, but to illuminate patterns that hurt everyone involved. I did a book tour. Spoke at bookstores, libraries, podcasts, conferences. Each event brought more stories. More people who'd lived versions of what I'd lived. More validation that this wasn't rare or unusual, but painfully common. Families consuming their most capable members and then acting shocked when those members finally stop allowing it. What struck me most was how many people were still in the thick of it. Still giving, still depleting themselves, still hoping for change that never came. I wanted to reach through the pages and shake them. Tell them they didn't have to live that way. But I also knew that realization had to come from within. No one could have convinced me to leave until I was ready. I had to arrive at that decision myself. One evening after a book reading in Seattle, a man probably in his 60s approached me. He was crying. "I'm the father," he said. "I'm the one who took from my son for years and then got angry when he cut me off. And reading your book, I finally understood what I did." I didn't know what to say. He continued. "It's too late now. He won't talk to me. Won't see me. I lost him. And I deserved that. But I wanted to thank you for helping me see it. For helping me understand that his walking away wasn't cruelty. It was survival." I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Compassion for his regret. Anger on behalf of his son. Sadness that it had taken a book from a stranger for him to see what should have been obvious. I told him the only thing I could. It's never too late to change how you treat the people still in your life. He might be gone, but you can do better with whoever's left. He nodded and walked away. That night I called Kevin. Told him about the encounter. He was quiet for a long time. "Do you think Dad ever got it? Before he died?" I thought about my father. About the brief moment at my mother's funeral when he'd said he was proud. About the years of silence before that. "I don't know. Maybe. But even if he did, he never let me see it. And that's on him, not me. Kevin sighed. I think about that sometimes. About having regrets at the end. About my daughter reading a book someday about someone like me, and realizing her dad was the villain in someone's story. That's why you're doing the work now, I said. So she doesn't have to write that book. That's the difference between you and Dad. You're changing while there's still time to matter. 15 years after the wedding, I sat in my office looking at a framed photo on my desk. It was from my wedding. Me and Sophia laughing at something off camera, completely present in that moment. Next to it was another frame. The photo my mother had sent years ago. Me and Rachel as kids by the tide pool. I'd kept it. Not out of nostalgia for what was, but as a reminder of what I'd learned. That people change. That relationships evolve. That sometimes love looks like holding on and sometimes it looks like letting go. And that both can be right depending on the circumstances. My company had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. We'd gone international, opened offices in 5 countries, developed technology that actually helped people. But more importantly, I'd built a culture where people felt valued. Where contributions were acknowledged. Where no one was invisible. I'd hired dozens of people over the years who reminded me of my younger self. Capable, driven, underestimated by their families. And I made sure they knew they mattered. Not just for what they produced but for who they were. Several of them had told me I was like family to them. Better than their actual family. And while that was sad in one sense, it was also beautiful. Because it meant I'd created the thing I'd always wanted and never had. Chosen family. People who showed up for each other not out of obligation but out of genuine care. I thought about that woman at the conference 10 years ago. The one who'd said she was still in it, still saying yes, still hoping to be seen. I wondered if she'd ever gotten out. If she'd found the strength to choose herself. I hope so. Because no one deserves to live their life as an afterthought in someone else's story. Everyone deserves to be the main character in their own narrative. And sometimes that means walking away from people who insist on writing you into a supporting role. That's what I'd done. And despite the pain, despite the loss, despite the complicated grief that never fully resolved, it was the right choice. The only choice. Looking back over 15 years of separation, rebuilding, and growth, I could see the arc of it clearly now. The breaking point. The wilderness of early independence. The gradual healing. The selective reconnection with people who'd done their own work. The building of something new and healthy and sustainable. It hadn't been clean or linear. Healing never is. But it had been real. And it had been mine. No one had given me permission to heal. No one had validated my choice or made it easier. I'd done it alone, and then gradually with the support of people I'd chosen, and that made it more meaningful somehow. Because I'd saved myself. And then I'd built a life worth saving. If I could go back and talk to the version of myself standing in that hallway 15 years ago, the one who'd just been told he wasn't welcome at his own sister's wedding, I'd tell him this. It's going to hurt worse before it hurts less. You're going to question yourself constantly. You're going to feel guilty and angry and sad all at once. You're going to wonder if you're overreacting, if you're being too sensitive, if you should just forgive and move on. But you're not. You're finally protecting yourself. And that's not cruelty. That's survival. And one day you'll be glad you did it. You'll build something beautiful out of the ashes. You'll find people who actually see you. And you'll understand that walking away wasn't giving up on family. It was refusing to give up on yourself. That's the truth I've carried for 15 years. The truth that writing a book and giving speeches and having hard conversations has only reinforced. You don't owe anyone access to you just because they're family. You don't owe anyone your peace, your resources, your energy, or your life. You get to choose who stays and who goes. And when someone shows you repeatedly that they don't value you, believe them the first time. Don't wait for the 10th or 20th or 100th time. Don't deplete yourself hoping they'll change. Change yourself instead. Change your boundaries. Change your availability. Change your willingness to accept less than you deserve. Choose yourself. Loudly. Repeatedly. Without apology. Because in the end, you're the only person guaranteed to be with you for your entire life. Everyone else is temporary. Make sure you're someone you want to spend that time with. And if you're reading this and you're where I was, trapped in a dynamic that's slowly killing you, I want you to know something. You're not alone. Your feelings are valid. Your exhaustion is real. Your desire to walk away doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. And you deserve better. You deserve to be seen, to be valued, to be loved without conditions or transactions. And if the people in your life can't give you that, then you deserve the space to find people who can. It won't be easy. It'll be one of the hardest things you ever do. But on the other side of that hard thing is freedom and peace. And a version of yourself you'll actually recognize and like. A version that exists fully without apology, without shrinking. And that version is worth fighting for. Promise you that. Because I found that version. And my only regret is that it took me so long to start looking. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.